Praise the Lord, guys. I'm Straw Greenhorn. And behold, the first one came unto him, saying, Lord, behold, thy pound had gained 10 pounds. The Lord said, Well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful in the little things, have thou authority over 10 cities. Then the second came unto him, saying, Lord, behold, thy pound had gained 5 pounds. The Lord said, unto him, Likewise, have thou authority over 5 cities. But then there came one unto him, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound which I have kept laid up in a napkin. So here still, almost to the midway point of the 19th chapter of Luke. We are now on the parable of the nobleman that went into a far country to receive a kingdom and was to return. So now we see this after, the Zacchaeus, moment where, Zacchaeus was introduced as being chief of the publicans, being rich, and how he was little in stature. He couldn't see Jesus because of the press, so he ran and climbed the sycamore tree. Jesus saw him. He said, make haste and come down. Today I must abide at thy house. And when he did, they murmured, He's going to be guest for that man that is a sinner. And how Zacchaeus presented his case before the Lord, said, Lord, behold, the half of my goods I give to the poor. If I've taken anything from any man by false accusations, I restore him fourfold. The Lord said, Today is salvation come to this house, for as much as he also is a son of Abraham. Showing unto them how the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. So we see him put forth this parable unto them, right? So, things are always connected, and especially right now. If you look at scriptures to understand them best, you look upline, the scriptures that came before, the events that happened, what happened, what did they do or say to lead him into this direction? What happened that he is trying to emphasize at a certain point. So now if we understand, the tale of Zacchaeus, how, this man was pure in heart, but having the stigma of the stereotype of being a publican, how they overcharged, the taxes, and they were a menace to the people, pigeonholing him into a certain identity because of his occupation. And the Lord in his wisdom, so we give thanks that God is a wise God, that God is a true, God, that he's a true judge. He's a wise judge and a true judge, because where others would look and, stereotypes would give them their judgment. What other people say would give them their judgment. What other people, cliches would give them their judgment. The family name would give them their judgment. You know, their past actions even, showing how a person can change. But, Jesus being the true and final judge of all things, he was able to see Zacchaeus' heart and his, intentions and actions. So, this parable, we understand, is connected to that, story. And, the connection, if you look at it, right, you see how they were ostracizing him, even murmuring against Jesus. What kind of man are you to go and, be this man's, guest? He's a sinner. What does that say about you? Even throwing, mud upon Jesus himself. So, this parable is to emphasize, a certain, principle that just happened, with him and Zacchaeus, and now, because, they have completely written Zacchaeus, right? And, he's attempting to open this door, have them reconsider. And, if they are able to, this not only would let them reconsider this right here, but, he's hoping that they'll have a change in heart, right? In their core, that, they won't be so hasty to judge a book by its cover, right? If he can change their operating system, so to speak, of thinking, if he can present unto them a new light where they can see the world from a different viewpoint, right? I think ultimately that would be such a great goal to accomplish, right? So, in principle, he's speaking of, this nobleman that went to a far to receive a kingdom, and it was said how he called his servants and he called 10 servants, gave them 10 pounds, told them, occupy till I come, but they hid him, and they sent a message. They hated him so much, they sent a message: we will not this man to rule over us. So they were so verbalizing, not, keeping in mind that they work for him. Right, he's the one that signs their paychecks. He's the one that gives them, so that they can go home and then take care of their family. Right, it's so amazing how we can get short-sighted. When life gets good enough, how short-sighted we can get. Right, I guarantee you, when they came onto this man, this noble man, seeking a job, right, how, humble they were, how obedient they were, how ready to serve they were. Then, you've been there long enough, you got used to him, you gain the benefits of being associated with him. You have a certain level of comfort in life, certain amenities. You're able to pay your bills, you're able to put food on the table, you're able to take nice vacations, buy nice things, eat nice things. And then, this creates a saturated, sense inside your mind. There's a scripture that says that full soul loatheth and honeycomb, but to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. Showing how, you get full enough. Even the sweetest thing that the Bible can mention, the honeycomb, even that you will hate, when you get full enough. But how the hungry soul, even the bitter things that you wouldn't even consider eating, even those are sweet. So, I think we see this on these servants, right? Because them sending after him said, we will not have you to rule over us. They couldn't say that the first day when they showed up, when they left their house, the wife and children there looking with expectant eyes, hoping that he will find something, to be able to bring home to the house that day. What a drastic change in outlook and perspective. What a drastic change expectation, right? Now, you're telling this very man, we will not be ruled over us, forgetting that they work for him, right? So, it's not said if they all said it, did they all on one accord have this opinion, right? Because, if you look at who this really applies to, Jesus, right? Now we understood that many cried, crucify him, but they were also his disciples. There were also those that, believed on him, that they just couldn't speak up because it was overwhelming, the authorities that they had, assembled together against him, right? They certainly couldn't speak out. And the chief priests, elders, and scribes, they were already putting people out the synagogue for even confessing on his name. Those that believed on him, they had to hold their head down when they heard his name, right? So, they were unable to stand up to this pressure, right? So we know that it's not, everybody hated him, but enough, hated him for this to be said. I'm wondering, is it the same among these 10 servants, right? But we would see ultimately that, even if they did, all hate him, some of them were able to go out and to do what, was expected of them, right? I'm reminded of the parable of the two sons. I might have two sons. He came unto the first and said, go ye, work in my garden. He said, I will go, but he did not go. But the second one said, I will not go. But then he ended up going, right? Which one of them did the will of the Father? The second one. So the one that said, I will not go, cannot that be said the same of, hating in this parable that we're speaking of right now? I will not go. Is that the same as saying he hated him, but he still did what was asked of him? Because, he was said, like I said, the citizens hated him and they sent a word after him, right? Say, we will not have you to reign over us. So is this like the second son also in that parable, right? That they said, you will not reign over us, but they still went and, as we're about to see, did what was asked of them. So, I still haven't, made the connection, to Zacchaeus, of why he's speaking this right now. Because, like what Zacchaeus said, the half of my goods I give to the poor, right? If I've taken anything from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. It's Zacchaeus that, the good servants here, as much as they have all these bad things to say of Zacchaeus, he's the one that went out and, turned his pounds into more pounds, right? All right, so the first verse says, so the first came unto him and said, Lord, thy pound had gained 10 pounds. So he, delivered unto 10 servants 10 pounds. Each servant got 1 pound. So as we're seeing them, they're saying that, thy pound. So now we understand there's a similar parable to this with the talent. One man was given 5 talents, the next one was given 3 talents, the next one was given 1 talent. And they all, the ones that did good, they doubled theirs. He that was given 5, he got 5 more. He that was given 3, he got 3 more. And the one that was given 1, as similar to this story, how he, wasted his talent, right? So he came unto him. So now he was said that he gave them this pound and told him, occupy till I come, right? Occupy. I wonder what kind of instructions were they given? Were they given to go and trade? Did he just say occupy? How specific was he, right? How did he teach them? Working for this man long enough, they were supposed to have known the ropes, right? What he was about, what his business was, and what was expected of them, right? So, we also see how, a person can be among organization and not capitalize on the opportunities that they have, right? Because if one ended up doing nothing with it, if you notice, I will use the example of musicians, right? How many groups of musicians started out as a group, right? But then something happened and the group fell apart. And then, one or, maybe 2 of them from the group went on to be great. Look at, Beyonce and Destiny's Child, right? We saw Beyonce, go, and then Kelly Rowland, but then the rest of them, we didn't really hear much from them. They had the fame, the door was open for them, but, you know, not willing to take on a builder's mind, right? And to start from scratch and to carry their own load, right? To see that, all things were possible and to start small, even if they had to, and, make something of it. This, also shows how a person, like I said, can be in an organization. And if you look at, Cash Money, you couldn't even use them, right? When they came out, how they were. But if you look at it now, who's active still, right? Lil Wayne, right? And, Baby, you don't really hear much from the rest of them. Juvenile kind of retired, BG kind of retired, Manny Fresh, you don't really hear much from them. Young Turk, I would say that he was the one that, maybe least, capitalized on what was available to him. So, it just shows what's in the heart, right? So he came and said unto him, Lord, thy pound had gained 10 pounds. I wonder, How serious did they think that he was? And how accountable would he have, hold them when he was leaving? Did they get a sense of how serious he was? Because it was said that when he returned, he commanded them to be brought to see how much each had gained by trading, to see how much they had gained by trading. Now, this is a very serious, expectation, right? This is a very, like, expecting something. We're not just willy-nilly messing around here. It's not just, hanging out or hanging around. We're expecting a return. We're expecting a product from this thing. We're expecting you to do something, and we're expecting you to take it serious. He called them, he said, he wanted to see how much they had gained by trading. Did they know they were supposed to be trading? When he told them, occupy till I come, was this, exit? So the first one came and said, Lord, thy pound. So they each got the same, right? Now, if you understand in life, we all have the same amount of time in a day, but we're not born into the same opportunities, right? Some people are born into richer family than others. Some people life, is shorter than others. How many people die in elementary school, right? How many people die before finishing high school? How many people die before college is over? How many people die before their 30s? How many people live until 40? How many people live until 50, right? So we all have 24 hours in a day, but we don't have the same amount of time in life, in total, right? Some people live up to their 70s, 80s, 90s, even to their hundreds, right? So this pound, I would like to say it's the 24 hours in a day, as well as the money that he gave them. But, if we look at life, like I said, if you look at your big names in wealth, your Oprah Winfrey's, your Donald Trump's, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, their kids, start at a different point, right? With this pound that's given. So he came and said, Lord, that pound had gained 10 pounds. So this is a tenfold. This is to be able to do this, I would say, did he gain this 10 pound on one activity? I would ask that question. Did he gain these 10 pounds on one activity? Which is possible, but I would say that that would not be the way to go, right? What I would say? I would say that pound, it gained one more pound. Then he took it and he put it, back in there, or he put it somewhere else. And then these 2 pounds gained 2 more pounds, right? And how he took those, 4 pounds now and said, okay, I can put this in four things, being able to adjust, on the fly, being able to improvise, make real-time decisions as things, come, to have the faith to believe that it's possible, to have the faith to follow through, to have the faith to know that, well, we'll try. And we're hoping for the best. And at the same time, the wisdom to know, okay, I need to stay away from certain things. Certain things I know it's not going to be good for me. At the same time, that certain things are more likely, right? I would love to, if you can imagine the mindset that this guy has, I would hardly ever say that 10 pounds, these 10, came from one thing. Which goes to show you that, the active mind, right? He said, what did Jesus say? To him that had shall be given, right? And he shall have abundance. And I liken that unto he that's moving, right? Like this, first guy was. How, as soon as the results came in, he went and he put it back out. And as soon as those came back, he went and he put it back, right? And he gained this 10 pound, return. Tenfold, 10 times. All right, so the next verse says, so then the Lord said, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful in the little things. I give thee authority over 10 cities. So, did they know that they would have, this is what was on the line? If they are taking it serious, they could have been over these cities, We were just, told that they were, told, occupy till I come. When God said, when the parable of the wheat and the tares, when the blade was sprung up, the wheat came, but the tares came also. He said, who had done this? They said, our enemy did this. They wanted to remove the tares. He said, no, let them grow together. I will separate them at the end. God, he doesn't want to be anybody's slave master, right? And, you know, I- it's not given the instructions they were given. But I asked the question, did they know what was on the line? Did they know that they would get, authority over cities? Did they just think that they were making him money? Because that's what, this guy could have thought, the one that wasted it. I'm just going to go and work hard, and then he's going to get the money. He's going to get this pound and everything else that I bring in, dragging his feet, saying, well, I'm not going to work hard to make this guy rich. I'm just going to work hard just to make enough for him to pay me. And this is also a glimpse into the world, right? This is also a glimpse into eternity. How, we will be weighed according to what we have developed, the skills we have developed, the talents we have developed, the pathways we have, unlocked, the things that we are able to bring together and coordinate. These things will determine how much, rule we have. Because if you look at God, right, he's always, giving authority over authority, right? Elijah, when he was up on the wall and the king sent to call him, right? the king sent his captain and 50 men. Elijah rained down fire and devoured them all. He sent another captain and his 50. Elijah did the same thing, right? When Jesus was feeding the multitude with fishes and the loaves, he told the disciples to make them sit down by fifties in a company. What is a company? A company is a division, usually of soldiers, right? Joshua, when he saw the angel with his sword drawn, he said, are you for us or for our adversaries? The angel said, I am a captain, of the host of the Lord. This was a captain. He was over, a certain amount. His number that he was over amount was not given. So if you understand, God, he's always looking to put captains over 50s, captains over 10s, captains over hundreds, captains over thousands. And as, he's saying unto this man, his pound gained 10 pounds, putting you over 10 cities because in what you have done, you are able to manage. Imagine if he was to put this wasteful guy over, any city, what would he do? He would fall to ruins. Everything would be out of order. When food supplies begin to run low, what would he do? When there was civil unrest, how would he, get things in order? How would he lead? How would he, keep the city running, in function and everything that it needs? This is a glimpse to the world to come. He's actually also revealing unto them this. It's gonna be the same thing. Based on what you have, proven yourself, able to be faithful with, to be effective with, to be useful with, and most importantly, to serve God with. Because when that man asked him, Lord, speak to my brother that he divided inheritance with me. And he gave the parable of the rich man whose ground brought forth plentifully. I'll pour down my barns and build greater. He didn't even have room enough to store it. I would say to my soul, soul, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Thou hast much goods laid up for many years. But what did God say unto him? Thou fool, this very night thy soul shall be required of thee. For so is he that layeth up treasures for himself and is not rich toward. So the being rich towards God is very important, right? So the Lord God, gave him a well done, thy good and faithful servant. Well done. It shows what God is looking for. And this was, how he just told him, occupy till I come. And, he didn't stand over any of them. He didn't, as a slave master. He didn't threaten them, right? He just let them be and see, allowed each man to show what was really in his heart. He let them be and gave them the freedom to express, because he's not looking for anybody to trick him, right? He's not looking for anybody to manipulate him, to do the things that he, they know that he wants, for a while. And then when circumstances come enough, then they stop. He just told them, but and if thy servant shall begin to say, my Lord doth delay his coming, and he shall begin to smite the men servants and maidens, and eat, drink, and be drunken, and the Lord of that servant will come unto him in a day in which he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware, and cut him in sunder, and appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. He's not looking for anybody to manipulate him, to do the things that they know that he wants, when it's convenient. And then when the time comes enough, then they stop and start doing some crazy things. So, he allowed them a blank canvas, paint, and then, he would judge according to this painting. So that's really what's happening here. So well done. I guarantee you, if that wasteful one was able to see these well done, the regret that would be in his heart, the regret, seeing what, because I guarantee you on Judgment Day, right, when we all see everything, some people are gonna have such, regrets. They're gonna be saying, God, we did not know that this is what you were looking for. I guarantee you on Judgment Day, a lot of people is gonna say, God, we did not know that this is what you were looking for. Because you see, when we understand the rules to a game, how easy it is to play that game. But when you don't know the rules, you can make such a fool of yourself. And there's so many in the world, that they mock God, right? They mock the things of God. But then, you see, when all is erased and we're just left standing with our God and his judgment, and you get to see that a lot of these things that you were, promoting it was given from, not from him. And you would see how you were tricked. You would see how you were led astray. God, we did not know that it was like this. We did not know that the things that what you were asking for were so simple. We did not know, there's so many things to distract in the world, right? So well done, that good and faithful servant that's been faithful in the little things. He just told them, he that is faithful in that which is least is also faithful in that which is much. He that is unjust in that which is least is also unjust in that which is much. The parable of the unwise steward, the wasteful steward, which is exactly what this man is about to do. So God called him faithful, right? Some people, they do the bare minimum just to get by. They say character is destiny, right? People do the bare minimum just to get by. And, look at this guy. He's about to be in trouble for wasting this talent. I said, his mindset might have been, I'm going to go and work hard and make all this money because, the boss, he's going to get all this. Why should I go and do this, for him to get these things? And then, look what's going to happen to him, weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Character is destiny. His character, if he would have said, I work hard, I'm a hustler, I make things happen. It's just, the air I allow around me. It's not that I'm doing this for anybody else. This is just who I am. Right? Alright, so the next verse says, so then when the second came unto him, he said, Lord, thy pound had gained 5 pounds. So now, the second guy, he comes in and, it's 5 pounds. So, this, nobleman, this master, he's having a good day so far. And if you look at, so he's gained what? 15, so far. So the one that, this guy is about to lose, the Lord, he ended up winning. Which goes to show you, in life, you see, if you despise people like that and you seek to pull them down, because look, he took this pound and wasted it. But this Lord, he got 15 pounds, 10 from the first and 5 from the second. So he lost this one. So he ended up, getting 14. So you see, while he was there trying to despise his boss, trying to sabotage him like this, he gained 14 pounds. And what happened to you? It just goes to show you how life, works out. And you don't want to find yourself, sabotaging anyone. You have your own path to walk. If your path is to sabotage others, then you took, many wrong turns, in many wrong places. Because, the mindset of how I described the first guy, right? What did I say? He put the first pound somewhere, he gained one. Then he took these two and he put them two places and they gained two. There might have been even a time where he put, like let's say, when he gained two, then he got four, right? Then he put the four in a place, but then only three gained back. So he lost one. So he ended up, instead of four was to be doubled to 8, he ended up with 7 instead. So this mindset that I'm describing, right? If you're, out to sabotage people, then, you're taking away, from your pound, gaining pounds. I think in life that we think that we can get away with certain things. I think in life that we think that, if we take a second to go and mess with somebody else's thing, then when we come back, everything for us will still be in line. Everything for us will still be as it needs to. And, you can't have these two things in your life at the same time, right? You just told them, the light of the body is the eye. If that eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. But if your eye be evil, thy body shall be full of darkness. Take heed therefore that the light that is within thee be not darkness. Showing that there's no mixture. It's either is gonna either be one or the other. Saying, and if thy whole body shall be full of light, having no part dark, then the whole shall be full of light, as when the bright shining of a candle that give thee light. You can either be like these two guys that gained the 5 or the 10 pounds, or you be the one that wasted it. There's no in between. There's no combination. It's funny how our human brain works and how we think the world works. It's either going to be all light or dark. A little leaven, he said unto them, a little leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. You go to sabotage somebody. That little leaven leavens your whole lump. Now your whole pound is, rotten and infested with worms and fungus, bacteria, and it's rotten, it's smelly, it's decaying, it's spoiled, and it stink. So the second one came unto him, saying, Lord, thy pound had gained 5 pounds. So this could either happen, one of two ways. Obviously, he was working, right? Remember when I said, about when the pounds gained, 4, one gained 2. Then you took those 2 and put them 2 places. Then those 2 gained 2 would make 4. Then when you put those, maybe only 3 or maybe only 2. So instead of, going from 4 to 8, you went from 4 to like 7 or 6. Or it could be that, he worked at a slower pace, right? And he was more cautious. He was, he wasn't as active improviser. He wasn't a dreamer as the first one was. Dreaming of all possibilities all day. Consumed with possibilities. Remember, they each got that 1 pound to begin with. So now, can you imagine the disappointment of the master? Because, he sees these first 2 bring 10 and then 5. What is he expecting for the third? This, raises his expectation, which means that it raises his disappointment also if it's not met. I once said how, we know that the good suffer for the bad, but sometimes the good can make the bad suffer. Because, if they had gone out and failed, and all of them failed, right? Or maybe they each only got 1, then maybe he wouldn't have looked at it as such a big deal. If they each either, got only 1, or they returned back with just the 1 they were given, or they lost it, then, a different, atmosphere would have been painted, right? And then, this guy, he wouldn't have been viewed the third one that we're about to speak of. So, sometimes the good can make the bad suffer by themselves, not suffer together. All right, so the next verse says, and the Lord said, likewise, have the authority over 5 cities. So this likewise is well done, that good and faithful servant. Were they all together when they were presenting these things unto him? If they were, then maybe he said it for the first one and not for the rest. Assuming the same unto them. But if not, then he would have wanted to have give this man his well done, thy faithful, which, shows you in this context what being faithful is. Being faithful is not looking at it as the third guy. I'm saying how, he's going to sit there and say, well, if I work extra and make more, the boss, he gets that. What do I get? I get more tired. I get more frustration. He gets richer. I get worn out, right? So I'm a cruise and do the bare minimum. I said character is destiny. So he said unto him also, be thou over 5 cities. And you see how you skip the first part, the well done, thy good and faithful servant. He's, like I said, he's emphasizing something about these 5, cities, which I'm saying is in the world to come. This is how it's going to be. Based on what we did here, is going to be our authority and rank. Based on what we did here, there's a scripture that says, there's different kind of glories. There's a glory of the sun, there's a glory of the moon, and there's a glory of the stars, showing a different weight of glory. He just said unto them, unto whom much is given, much shall be required. Unto whom men have committed much, they shall ask the more. He that knew not and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with fewer stripes. So then, if he has, a ranking for being beaten with stripes, does he not also have a ranking for glory in, these pounds that you accumulate? So, this being said 2 times is being emphasized. Be thou and have the authority over 5. So the first one, he got 10. His pound gained 10. He got authority over 10 cities. The second one, his pound gained 5. He got authority over 5 cities. There's a scripture that says, there had no temptation taken us but such as is common to men, but God is faithful, never allowing us to be tempted more than that which we are able to handle. And with the temptation, he shall provide a way of escape. If he doesn't allow us to be tempted more than that we could handle, then he's not going to give us, authority over more cities than we can handle. It works both ways. In life, people, when we're weighing out the good way, people are enthusiastic and ready to receive and ready to argue. But then when it comes to the bad version, right? When it comes to the, my pound had gained 10 pounds, we want to argue. We want 10 cities, right? But then, we're found worthy of being beaten with the stripes of 10 cities. We'll argue that, right? So we also see this Lord's willingness to trust them. This was an audition. It's funny how we live life, not knowing that life is an audition, not only for eternity, in heaven with God, which is what we're discussing. But life is an audition for opportunities that Lady Luck is gonna put your way. Life is an audition for if you're ready to handle certain blessings. Life is an audition if you can be trusted with certain things. Your life is an audition. Are you worthy to be put on certain paths that lead you certain places? But sometimes we can't be bothered in the moment. And sometimes, we've been beaten down, so much. Sometimes we have bad influences telling us, not to reach for the stars, that nothing is possible. Don't be a dreamer. There's so many things that I can list that would hold people down, from reaching. All right, so the last verse says, and then there came one also who said unto him, Lord, behold, here I have kept thy pound laid up in a napkin. So this man, he comes and he says this. And this would let me, speculate that they did not present unto him at the same time in the same room where they could see each other. Because there's no way that he would watch these two, present their having gained 10 and having gained 5. And then, he returns, he comes unto him like this. But, I could be wrong. Obviously, I could be wrong, right? But the way that he comes unto him, Lord, here's thy, that I have kept up in a napkin, as if it needs to be, sheltered and protected. If you think of a weight, right? A weight on a burden. Weights and burdens, they're not shy of being weights and burdens. In those days, the ox and the ass, they pulled, to till the field. In one of the parables, one of the guys said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee have me excused, from the wedding, the parable of the wedding. Sheltering this thing, not seeing it as a seed. A seed in your hand is a seed in your hand. A seed in the ground is a tree of whatever it might be. Tree of oranges, tree of apples, tree of figs. We're talking about, figs, so often. So he comes, presenting this thing as if the Lord gave it unto him. Shelter protect, like as if it was a precious stone, like a diamond or a ruby. We gain in life by, trying, by attempting. If we fail, we get back up, we learn, we go at it again. Trial and error. Keep fighting until you make it happen. This guy, he had the complete wrong mindset, thinking that this is something that needed to be protected or safeguarded, and not something that needed to be, exposed. If you look at, seamstress, people that, sew, how they get those calluses on their hands. And where does it come from? It comes from handling the needle, day in, day out, every day. This pound, was supposed to be like that. It was supposed to handle the needle, and get poked and get poked and get poked and get the thick skin, the thick callus, and develop over time. But he babied this thing. He was so gentle and delicate with it. When it was supposed to be poked by the needle to get the callus and thick skin, he was keeping it neat in such a napkin, he said, right? And that's just a great comparison, right? Because look at that napkin, how soft it is, and cushiony, right? But the needle pointed pokes, and it hurt. How many things in life are like this, where it takes exposure to something and not being sheltered? A lot of things. A lot of things in life, it takes exposure and not being sheltered. And you know that this world is backwards, right? The Bible says, in the last days, men shall be lovers of themselves more than the things of God, having a form of godliness, denying the power thereof, and how the love of many shall wax cold. On the issue of sexuality. Now, sexuality is the opposite to what I just described. Sexuality is not for exposure, but sexuality is for nurturing and protecting. Sexuality, you protect it in this napkin and not expose it to the needles of the seamstress to get that callus. But like I said, this world is backwards, right? And I just proved that this world is backwards, right? So you came and said, Lord, behold, here is thy pound which I have kept laid up in a napkin. You were supposed to go out and experiment with this thing. You were supposed to go out, get it dirty, roll it around, bounce it off the wall, see how far it bounces back to you. You were supposed to go and be a dreamer. How many people are afraid to dream with their own money? Here is somebody else's money. Go and dream all you want with it. Take risks that you would be able to take with your own. But this guy, he had the complete wrong mindset. All right, so here we are, about almost to the midway point of the 19th chapter of Luke, where it started out saying, and he entered and passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a certain man named Zacchaeus, who was chief of the publicans, and he was rich. And he desired to see Jesus, who he was, but could not because of the press, and he was little in stature. So he ran before and climbed up into a sycamore tree for to see him, for Jesus was to pass by that way. When Jesus was at that place, he came and looked up and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must abide at thy house. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all murmured, saying that, behold, he's gone to be guest with a man that is a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said unto him, Lord, half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have taken anything from any man by false accusation, I restore him fourfold. Jesus said, today is salvation come to this house, for as much as he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. So it came to pass, as they heard these things, he added and spake a parable unto them, because he was nigh unto Jerusalem, and because they thought that the kingdom of God should immediately appear. Therefore he said unto them, certain nobleman went into a faraway country to receive for himself a kingdom, and then to return. So he called unto him his 10 servants, and delivered unto them 10 pounds, and told him, occupy till I come. But these citizens hated him, and sent a message after him, saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. And it came to pass, when he was returned, having received the kingdom, he commanded these servants to be brought before him, unto whom he had given the money, that he might learn how much each man had gained by trading. Then we pick up right here where it says, so then came the first unto him, saying, behold, Lord, thy pound had gained 10 pounds. The Lord said, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Has been faithful over a few things, have the authority over 10 cities. So then the second came unto him, saying, Lord, that pound had gained 5 pounds. The Lord said, likewise, have the authority over 5 cities. Now then there came one unto him, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound which I have kept laid up in a napkin. I'm Straw Greenhorn.